Stephen A. Smith has apologized for remarks last week suggesting that Donald Trump was receiving support from the black community because we relate to his legal woes.
A lot of folks in black America seem pretty pissed at me right now. For that, I sincerely apologize.
But it wasn't really an apology.
My words were misconstrued, that my words were taken out of context, misrepresenting and depicting me in a way I found every bit as insulting and disrespectful as folks in black America evidently felt about what they thought I said.
So let's go back and revisit what Smith actually said.
Black folks find him relatable because what he's going through is similar to what black Americans have gone through. He wasn't lying. He was telling the truth.
How exactly was that taken out of context?
When you see the law enforcement, the court system, and everything else being exercised against him, it is something that black folks throughout this nation can relate to with some of our historic, iconic figures. We relate to you when you're suffering like that because we know we have.
It's insulting that Smith seems to compare Trump's 4 criminal indictments and 88 felony charges to the legal attacks on iconic black historical figures, people like Marcus Garvey, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and Angela Davis, who were targeted by law enforcement because they were fighting for black people. Trump, on the other hand, is facing 2 criminal cases for fighting against black people by trying to throw out millions of black votes in Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, and other cities with large black populations in states he lost in 2020. What's most insulting about Smith's argument is his attempt to equate the legal troubles of a self-proclaimed white billionaire with an army of lawyers assigned to delay his cases to the struggle of ordinary African Americans. Trump's interest in police accountability only applies to himself, which is why he attacked FBI agents for raiding his home in Mar-a-Lago to execute a lawful search warrant, but endorsed Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron after he failed to charge the police officers who shot and killed Breonna Taylor in a botched raid in Louisville. Perhaps Smith forgot that Trump is not the hero fighting against racial profiling and targeting of black people, but the villain who's openly encouraging it, who tear-gassed peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters, threatened to shoot looters on the spot, and encouraged police brutality by telling cops,
"Please don't be too nice."
Or maybe he forgot that Trump's 2020 election scam targeted and endangered the lives of 2 black Fulton County workers, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who had to go into hiding to protect themselves from his vigilante. Or that his infamous 1989 lynch mob helped to lock up 5 wrongly accused black and brown teenagers in prison for years. Black people will face even greater threats if Trump is elected in November. He promises he will pardon the January 6th insurrectionists,
Indemnify all police officers, and we will bring back a thing called stop and frisk
that unfairly targeted black people. Stephen A. Smith's non-apology apology mentions none of that history or policy, but he does justify his earlier remarks by citing 5 recent polls that show Trump leading Biden. He does not explain that early polls are non-predictive of election outcomes, that black voters have been the most loyal constituency of the Democratic Party, or that Trump received minuscule black support in 2016 and 2020. But even if you believe the polls, Smith citing them as a suggestion that prosecutors should reconsider their cases because of Trump's alleged popularity reflects an abdication of his responsibility as a journalist. All polls indicate that black people overwhelmingly reject Donald Trump. But perhaps more black Americans would appreciate the grave danger he poses if influential black people with popular platforms realize they have a duty to educate, not just to entertain.
You know, that's some top line cooning that Stephen A. Smith has been doing. There's no other way to put it. He would say, there's no other way to put it. Top line cooning, because that brother just broke it down. He broke it down. And this idea, you misheard. He played it back. Nobody misheard anything, Stephen A. Smith. And to, like he said, to equate, to even say that black folks can relate to the so-called sufferings, prosecution of Donald Trump. No, we cannot. This guy repeatedly, and again yesterday, openly defying gag orders that we would never have been warned the first time. He's been warned about 187 times. And get this, his right hand, one of his right-hand men, Walt Nauta, co-defendant in his classified documents case, told the FBI that Trump promised a pardon if he lied to the FBI. He says, if you're charged with lying to the FBI, I will pardon you in 2024. So he wanted him to lie about the classified documents. And here's another thing from yesterday's proceedings. This is Stephen A. Smith's president, Donald Trump. I'm going to read directly what happened yesterday. David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, testified this about all of the lies that they concocted. He said they went to Trump Tower and Mar-a-Lago, and they came up with this hit piece on all of Trump's opponents, including Ted Cruz, the disgusting Ted Cruz, the groveling Marco Rubio, and even Ben Carson. The paper, the National Enquirer, David Pecker admitted, I should say, on the stand yesterday, that those stories, Ted Cruz was made up. They got a photo together. They photoshopped to make it look like his dad was there when Kennedy was killed, that he had something to do with Kennedy's assassination. Pecker testified that it was all made up with Trump's fingerprints on it. He says, we matched the photos and the different pictures with Lee Harvey Oswald and matched the two together. And that's how that story was prepared, created, I would say. This is what Pecker said on the stand. He said he did it because it appeared that Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Ben Carson were gaining popularity on the campaign trail, that they seemed to have done a better job in the debates than Donald Trump. And he says in other cases about Ted Cruz in particular, he says, we certainly would embellish stories, if not make them up. And he also talks about Marco Rubio. And Marco Rubio, they concocted this story that Rubio, this is what he testified to yesterday, had a love child and was basically a cocaine addict. When reached, this is to show you just how weak that Ted Cruz and how weak Marco Rubio is. When reached, Ted Cruz says, oh, we don't want to revisit the past. Marco Rubio says, oh, I that's no big deal. I have no comment. So weak. And remember, he disparaged Marco Rubio's wife. There's a couple of things you're going to fight about as a man. Somebody talking about your mama and somebody disrespecting your wife. These guys, Rubio and Cruz, I can't say what I really want to say. But here's what Ted Cruz said back on the campaign trail about Donald Trump. He says, Trump is a pathological liar. He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth, and in a pattern that I think is straight out of a psychology textbook. His response is to accuse everyone else of lying. That is Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz made that statement. But we have people like Stephen A. Smith, who not only, and the thing that folks are not really focusing on is that one of the things Stephen A. Smith said on the Sean Hannity show, he also said it, he did a separate video and said that they can't beat Trump at the polls. So they're going to try and take him out in the courts. They can't beat him in policy. Trump's policy, as that young man that we showed, Greer put up earlier, spelled out, is to shoot Black and brown people in the street if he thinks that they're loitering. Bring back stop and frisk, where 90+% of those stopped and frisked are people of color. We can go on and on. Those two election workers that he endangered their lives. Let's not even mention the exonerated 5. And yet, you have your Stephen A. Smiths of the world and the other fellow coons who want to bring up the crime bill. Well, you know, this guy, he put the crime bill. Well, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. That's one way of looking at the crime bill, because everybody wanted that bill, not just Joe Biden. Not just Joe Biden. And yes, Austin, as we speak, Cruz and Rubio are very much still backing Trump. And yes, they still go home every night to the woman that Trump called ugly. David Youngblood says Stephen A. Smith failed to acknowledge that fact that Biden beat the man by 7 million votes, contradicting his very premise. And that's where I was going, David. And Mike V says, I'm not sure why Stephen doesn't get the George versus Trump case. He asked the Georgia versus Trump case. He asked the Secretary of State for 11,780 votes to help win a key battleground state. This is election interference. And that's one of the reasons why he's been indicted. So everything about Stephen A. Smith's Fox News MAGA rant, it fits right into the MAGA playbook, is to lie or to make up alternative facts, as they say, as Kellyanne Conway said years ago. Alternative facts, because they did beat Trump. And the policy, again, we went into the policies just now, what Trump's policies are, right? To cage little babies of color, separate them from the parents. Doesn't that sound familiar? Slavery, separating families. Stephen A. But this guy, wearing blackface, Stephen A. Smith, wants you to believe otherwise. And comes out with the non-apology apology. Pay attention, Stephen A. He could have just dropped it. But then he doubles and triples down, making it worse, showing his true colors or non-color. But give me a break. It's like, even if you're not, and I always say this, I cover politics. We cover politics on this show. I have to write about politics. Just not into it. So even if you're like that, you see the facts before you. You see the facts before you. But it's irritating when you have a Black individual or an individual of color with such a platform as ESPN and to spew this self-hatred and misinformation and disinformation on this large platform, and to intentionally do it. How much are they paying you? How much is MAGA paying you, Stephen A? Because I know there's a check involved. I know there's a check involved. He's trying to get security. in case Trump wins, because he knows he's not a dumb man. He's not a stupid man. He's a wise man. He knows what's coming if the MAGA king gets back in office. So he's trying to protect his interest, but he's mistaken, because there's no loyalty in Mr. MAGA. There's no loyalty in him at all, especially seeing somebody of your ilk. Dr. Nicole says these folks are either weak or probably just scared because Trump has some dirt on them too, because that's how Trump and his folks roll. And he says, you're right, Stephen A. may be getting paid or extorted to say what he's saying. Right. Yeah, something going on there. But then explain dudes like him, like Ice Cube. Explain dudes like Snoop Dogg. And go on and on and on. What Killer Mike? They all getting a paycheck. They all got a paycheck signed in blood. And that is the bottom line. This is the Black press of America. So we have to speak truth to power. David says that, David Youngblood says it's not that complicated. Stephen A. tasted that ice water. I tell you, it is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Or very believable, right? Very, very much believable that these folks. So the trial continues in New York, and, you know, the early start. Now, one of the things to remember, because the early start of this trial, it looks right away out of the gate, it looks horrible for the twice impeached and 4 times indicted former president. But remember, it's the prosecution's case right now. And one of the reasons why it looks so bad out the gate is because this Pecker, David Pecker, was Trump's guy, still is his guy. He goes over yesterday to the defense table. Hello, how you doing, Mr. President? So there was a big blow to Donald Trump. And the only thing that they could have hoped for is that loyalty would have ran to the point where, like others, that David Pecker would have perjured himself. And David Pecker apparently is just not going to do that. David Pecker realizes, look, you may not win the presidency, and which means I may not be able to get a pardon. So, you know, I'm not going to hedge my bets that way. And Mike V, you're absolutely right. He says, remember when Steve Harvey and Jim Brown ran their happy behinds up to Trump Tower to kiss the ring? Yeah, I remember. Jim Brown, much more so than Steve Harvey, surprised me. But now I'm not surprised by anybody, to tell you the truth. I'm not surprised by anybody. I mean, if somebody told me today that Al Sharpton was MAGA, was getting a check from MAGA, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. I don't care who it is. Ben Crump, it doesn't matter. I don't care who it is. The way things are, and seeing these dudes come out, because the last people I thought would ever come out as MAGA would be these hardcore rappers. So those guys who have, like, on the fringes of the civil rights movement, they don't surprise me. They don't surprise me at all. And David, you're right. Trump has never said a disparaging word about David Pecker. So very interesting. Very interesting stuff. Turning our attention now to Brittney Griner. Before we get to Brittney, though, I have to mention. And I hope, Greer, I hope you have this. Greer sent me this video yesterday that I was actually, before she sent it to me, I was marveling over it. And I was showing my wife this early yesterday. So this sports caster for the New York Knicks, Monica McNutt, this will go down. She's for ESPN radio, which she calls Knicks games. This will go down as perhaps the most real commentary. She's the color commentator. And when I say color, not because she's a black woman, the position is called color commentator. She's not the play-by-play person. And the Knicks pulled off one of the miracle of miracles the other day against the Philadelphia 76ers. There's a lot of controversy there, but aside from that, if we have it, Greer, we got to show it. Take a look at Monica.
By 5. Brunson still with the dribble. Stops in the dotted circle. Little pitch and catch with Hart. Now Brunson, left side of the arc, tries to split the defense. Lowry knocks it away. Loose ball picked up by DiVincenzo. Circling at the top of the arc. Into the corner. Brunson, pump fake, three-pointer, left side, front rim. Gets the roll. Three-pointer is good. It's a 2-point game. Knicks down 2 with 27 seconds to go. Inbound is knocked away by Maxey. Gets the ball back, falls to the floor, stolen by Hart. DiVincenzo three-pointer, no good. Hartenstein, the offensive rebound. He kicks it out to Anunoby. DiVincenzo again. Knocks it down. Knicks lead. 13 seconds to go. Timeout, Philadelphia.
This is unreal. You talk about a team that refuses to quit and has been saying since the last dozen games of the regular season, as loud and proudly as anyone who will listen, we will find a way. Jalen Brunson has had a flat-out terrible basketball game, but knocks down a three to make it a one-possession ball game. The scramble, the rebound, and Dante DiVincenzo, who set a new Knick high in three-pointers made, adds one more in this postseason. Oh my God.
That is classic. I mean, her reaction, the body language, the facial expressions as this was unfolding. And then here's the great thing about what you just saw there. If you're just really not paying attention to sports broadcasting, she took it all in, and then she was able to calmly describe what exactly had happened, gave context to it all. And another thing I loved about it is generally, as crazy and loud as the Garden was, their microphones are right there. She spoke very right into the microphone. She didn't yell. A lot of announcers do. They're yelling over as if they're not into the microphone and as if they got to yell over the crowd. You don't have to yell over the crowd. But she was absolutely phenomenal. And for people to say that women can't do this job, Monica McNutt just laid the foundation. She just knocked that out of the park. The description, and then to give the context, to go into the history, this year's history with Dante DiVincenzo and how he had hit more threes than any other Knick. And Jalen Brunson's poor game, but then he sinks the three. I mean, that was just amazing, amazing broadcasting right there. Big, big ups to Monica McNutt. It's just amazing. You cannot top that. That is just amazing. That raw emotion and everything else. David Youngblood says she kept her cool and smoothly described the scene and the team's character. I just thought, wow, amazing. Of course, the Rangers won last night. Another raucous night at the Garden, across the street over there. Another raucous night. They up 2-0 in their series against the Washington Capitals. So New York is where it's at right now, y'all. It's where it's at. Just gotta love it. Right, Power 96, you was raised better than that. Come on. Slow. Oh, God. want to get to Brittney Griner. You know, it's been more than a year since she returned home from her ordeal in Russia, and she's finally sat down to talk about it. They're going to show the full interview on May 1st on Good Morning America, but she surveyed her new surroundings when she was at the Russian penal colony. The enormity of her prison confinement had suddenly dawned on her. And speaking to Robin Roberts, Brittney says that it was that moment that she felt just less than a human. She said there was a bloodstained mattress that they gave her. And then there was a huge knife there. She contemplated killing herself. And she said she had no soap, no bathroom paper, tissue. She just thought that this was the end for her, for real. And she broke down during that interview with Robin Roberts, as you could imagine. And so it again brings to the conversation, the conversation of the pay that the WNBA players receive. And we've had this discussion many a times. And you know, what I don't like about the discussion now is I'm looking at headlines everywhere popping up every day about this, about it being now about Caitlin Clark. That is disturbing on many levels. We don't even have to go into it. But Brittney is writing a book. And she says she hopes to raise awareness surrounding other Americans wrongly detained abroad. Remember, she said she was not going to forget Paul Wheeling and others. And she details that in her book that's coming out. She's also in contention for a spot on the U.S. Olympic teams for this summer's Paris Games. And she came back pretty strong when you consider in the circumstances. She averaged 17.5 points a game, 6 rebounds, or more than 6 rebounds a game, and over 2 assists a game. And she ranked second in the league in field goal percentage. She shot 56% from the field. And she was third in blocks, almost 2 blocks per game. So she, you know, she's a 9-time All-Star. She won a WNBA title in 2014. And so it's just not about her imprisonment that she can talk about. This is an athlete who's accomplished much. And I agree with you on this for sure, Power 96. I am so glad it wasn't Gayle King she sat down with. And even for her own sake, for Brittney's own sake, because who knows what would have come out of Gayle King's mouth. And just to go back a little bit, Big Sis Monique Daniels says that the Sixers are challenging the referees, stating that they are not getting calls. The refs are looking the other way. Shaquille O'Neal came out also talking about the last 30 seconds of that Knicks Sixer game. And it's so interesting that they're all doing this now because it's the New York Knicks. And I think with the Knicks, and the reason why Knicks fans get so passionate and take everything to heart is because they realize that these guys, Kenny Smith, Charles, Shaq, and the NBA itself is always against them. It's always downing them. There was before the Maxey situation, the Tyrese Maxey situation, where he was definitely fouled. There's no question about it, he was fouled. But just before he got fouled by Jalen Brunson that they didn't call, he fouled Josh Hart on that inbound play. He pushed off with 2 hands. There was another sequence in that fourth quarter in which Joel Embiid elbowed Josh Hart again to the head. Now, why this attack on Josh Hart from the Sixers, the physical attack? It's because he's killing them. And the referees have let so much go against the Knicks, not for the Knicks. So they decided to swallow their whistle. And this play right here was not called a foul. This is a game that the Knicks had against the Heat earlier, I believe. And it was no foul call. And you can see that both players have Mitchell Robinson's arms. But I saw in that game too, a number of foul calls that the officials determined were just incidental. And it was just ridiculous. Jalen Brunson it's like after every game, he needs stitches. He doesn't get the calls at all, the obvious calls. And so referees have qualified immunity, right, Quinn? Mike V. Quinn says, go Sixers. He says, we were robbed, no timeout. The Sixers robbed themselves. They robbed themselves. You had your two superstars, Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, scoring about 70 points. Dominating. Both of them were dominating. The Knicks superstar, Jalen Brunson, couldn't hit anything. Poor game. And yet, and in both games so far in this series, Jalen Brunson has yet to show up. That three-pointer at the end there notwithstanding, he's yet to show up. The Sixers stars have shown up, and yet the Sixers are in an 0-2 hole. I think it speaks to the fact that the New York Knicks are an extremely solid basketball team. They earned that number 2 seed, and they're showing you why. And this team is not, the New York Knicks are not going away. They are set up. If they don't win this year, which I don't expect them to win the championship this year. But I tell you what, they got some great talent on that team. They are set up for the future. 7 number 1 draft picks. And assets galore. They're set up very well. So great job by the Knicks. And one reason, just to close that out, the Knicks are not liked by the league and others is because of their owner, James Dolan. He is somebody it's impossible to like. It's impossible to like James Dolan. It's like the one that they kicked out, John Sterling, from the Clippers. The only people who liked Donald Sterling was probably his parents. And the same probably can be said about, and it may not be able to be said about James Dolan, because I remember when Charles Dolan, his father, owned the Knicks, and it was a coup. He took over the Knicks and Cablevision at the time from his father in a power struggle. So I don't even think James Dolan's parents liked him. They're gone now. So that is, and you understand why people, if you know anything about James Dolan, you know why people don't like James Dolan. I don't like James Dolan. I will never like James Dolan until and unless he issues a public apology to Charles Oakley and hangs Charles Oakley's numbers from the rafters where it belongs. That's my spiel. The Knicks, Mike V says, Knicks are number 3 seed for a reason. Acting like Knicks need the refs win is cap. Right. They're number 2 seed, by the way, Mike. They beat Milwaukee for that 2nd seed. And Milwaukee is struggling against the Indiana Pacers. They got their heads handed to them last night in Milwaukee. I tell you, I feel bad for Doc Rivers in a way. That curse is being lifted, Power 96. That curse is being lifted. Turning our attention now to U.S. Coast Guard. Captain Zeta Merchant has made history as the first Black female admiral in the Coast Guard's 233-year history. Admiral Merchant, previously the commander of Sector New York, will now lead the Coast Guard Personnel Service Center in D.C., where she will oversee recruitment and scholarships. She said that she initially joined the Coast Guard with the intention of financing her medical school education. She says, I always had this passion for service, but I never thought it would be in the form of military service. I really feel like this is God's plan and not my plan. She is, he's made history. She has made history. And you know, the Coast Guard is interesting. Looking up some history there, as far as like African-American history in the Coast Guard, they've played a very essential role, African-Americans have, in the history of the Coast Guard. From the earliest days of the U.S. Revenue Cutter Service, Black sailors served alongside their white counterparts. Many of them have made significant contributions during various conflicts. The quasi-war with France in 1812, it was the African Americans in the Coast Guard that made the difference. It goes on. I did not know that Alex Haley, yes, of Roots fame, his family, of course, that was his story. He was a Coast Guard member. It just astonishes when you, and this is the history that MAGA folks want to erase. This is part of that history that they want to erase. I mean, you go back, Bobby, who was it? Loveen Freeman and Bobby Wilkes became the first Black graduates from Officer Candidate School in 1954 and 1956, respectively. And then Merle Smith, the first African-American graduate of the Coast Guard Academy in 1966, have received a Bronze Star Medal for his services in Vietnam. You have Vince Patton, became the first Black Master Chief Petty Officer in 1998. And he was followed by Earl Brown, the first Black Flag Officer in 2002. Janine McIntosh, she earned her wings as the first African-American female aviator in 2005. And then again in 2009, Felicia Thomas became the first Black female to command a cutter. So the history is abound. It really is resounding when it comes to the Coast Guard. I'm sure in other military operations as well, as Power 96, a veteran himself, knows. And yes, Mike V, book burning is usually the first signs of genocide. I agree. But that is the history that they want to get rid of. That is part of it. President Biden is going to give the commencement address at Morehouse College next month. The White House confirmed yesterday that he will address Morehouse, and it will be the second consecutive year that the president has gone to a historically Black institution to deliver the commencement address. Last year, it was Howard University, of course, in D.C. And we know that Morehouse has a storied history and legacy of nurturing influential Black leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr. and even Raphael Warnock, the senator out of Georgia. Of course, Morehouse is a beacon of empowerment and academic excellence. The senator, says in a statement, I am thrilled to see President Biden return to our great state to deliver this year's commencement address. his administration's commitment to addressing the soaring costs of higher education and initiatives like canceling debt for over 4 million Americans have been pivotal in narrowing the racial wealth gap. Stephen A., did you hear that? Did you hear that, Stephen A.? So the president will be speaking at Morehouse University. It's always interesting when a sitting president gives the commencement address. Some don't like it. There are some students like, I'd rather, someone else. And you get it. You get it, because the last thing you want, and I'm not sure that he will do this. I don't know, haven't been privy yet if he's even had the speech written yet. But what you don't want is a campaign address as your commencement address. And students have a right, I believe, to help determine things like that. They have a right to have a graduation ceremony in which they don't have to worry about politics. So we will see how the president handles his graduation, his commencement address. And Mike V says maybe Obama should do it. Speaking of Obama, before we close, did you happen to see Michelle Obama go undercover at a Target? I mean, not necessarily undercover either. I mean, she had on some glasses. And it was so interesting. It's always interesting to see this when folks don't recognize and they go about their business. I mean, she went in, she had discovered this particular Target. She said she couldn't believe that this particular Target was selling her book. So she went in, she signed about 6 of them and put them back on the shelves. Something Jamel Hill has been doing on a regular basis, going into a bookstore in different areas, covertly signing the books and leaving them. And this young lady at the cash register has no idea who she is. And just to give it a test, Michelle Obama did try to strike up a little bit of a conversation. She told the young lady, "I love your hair." She didn't recognize her. Now, by now she may have seen this video. And others who was in the store shopping at the time, you mean to tell me that, that we were in the store with Michelle Obama? And there was her book, and she decides to sign it. Now, it's pretty empty. The store, I don't know what time of day she went, but it was pretty empty there. You'd have liked a better test on that to see if perhaps she'd gone during a pretty much crushed time, but I guess Secret Service would not have approved of that. Mike V says Michelle Obama in Target with Crocs on and a bonnet on her head. It's some might say it's pretty given. I don't know how to use those terms. My daughters, if they heard me say that, they're probably cringing right now. And Austin says, who would want Trump as a commencement speaker, even for a kindergarten class? And David suggests that David Youngblood suggests that President Biden speak to his own youth. He got to reach real far for that. No, let me stop. He should speak to his own youth, his doubt, his mentors, his passions, and his growth without ever mentioning an election or office. Agreed. I mean, he mentioned his office. I mean, everyone knows he's the president of the United States, but I agree. Those are things. Certainly do not mention, the election. But yeah, I get it. Where he came from. He has his story is pretty compelling. We've heard his story. I mean, I've heard his story. And pretty compelling story. So yes, pull from that. Whoever is writing the president's speech, hopefully they pull from that. And I like the idea that David Youngblood put in there, his mentor. Speak about his mentors. Who was his mentors? Who does he today? Who does he lean on today? Look, the job of the president of the United States is one that is perhaps the most pressured position there could be.
Ago today, Donald Trump said this.
Thank you very much. So I asked Bill a question that probably some of you are thinking of if you're totally into that world, which I find to be very interesting. So supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that has him in check, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right. And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me. So we'll see. But the whole concept of the light, the way it kills it in 1 minute, that's.
We are 100% better off than we were 4 years ago.
This guy, y'all remember that injecting? Remember he talked about injecting bleach, and and some people did it. Some people did it and died. You can't drink bleach. This guy, wow, and he says we're better off than we were before. But you know, those are the type of things that the Biden-Harris campaign should be highlighting. They just remind folks, because folks have such short memories today. It's unbelievable. Just remind them. Throw it out there, and you know, your campaign ad. Throw it out there. One of the things I noticed that the Biden-Harris campaign is doing, they're highlighting that Trump keeps falling asleep in court, and they're calling him Sleepy Don. This is where American politics are at now. Such a maybe at its lowest point ever. Mike V says Biden should speak to a class of AFL-CIO people. That's the blue-collar voter base he needs right now. And Austin says Dr. Birx was looking at her shoes and praying for her chair to fall into a deep hole. The comments are something else. Power 96 says if he didn't speak at an HBCU, he would have been criticized. Biden don't like blacks, blah, blah. And I don't remember who spoke at my college graduation. He says he was on that Hennessy. And crawfish, probably. But that's okay, Power 96. At least you got through your graduation. You got through it. And it's like we got through this morning's headlines. And we appreciate you so much. Remember, go to our YouTube page, even if only for a moment, and hit subscribe to the LIBK-news, Let It Be Known News, and share your thoughts, share your ideas, and everything else that you might want to share. Share it right there. And we will be back tomorrow with some more headlines. Thanks for joining us.